Taking ownership of your inner transformation will help you create a foundation for success. In this episode, I'm joined by transformational expert Mark Tanaka. We dive into a deep conversation about transformation that will help you understand and shift your patterns. You'll also learn how to detach yourself from your emotional wounding so you can begin to create an inner transformation that will help you become a more powerful thought leader. Mark Tanaka is a healer, educator, and pioneer in the field of inner transformation. He helps individuals take control of their bodies and minds so they can become the best and truest version of themselves and create the inner foundation for success in life. Mark is well studied in Eastern body-mind training methods and philosophy and integrates this with cutting-edge psychology and coaching. He teaches and practices a holistic approach to life transformation and entrepreneurship with an emphasis on creating life success through dialing your inner game. Mark helps his clients identify the unconscious coping strategies and defense mechanisms held in their bodies and minds and how to effectively release them so they can end the endless loop of self-sabotage. Mark is a well-respected teacher of yoga, qigong, meditation, and energy medicine in Silicon Valley and in the Bay Area, and is a faculty member at Luminous Awareness Institute School of Energy Medicine. Today's episode is sponsored by How to Conquer Your Bullshit with CPR, my free training that will help you bring your message to the masses. Sign up for this free training at rubyfremont.com/CPR. And finally, whether you're new to this podcast or you're a loyal thought leader, please make sure you take a moment to drop a rating and review on iTunes. Now it is time to dive deep with Mark Tanaka. Welcome to today's Thought Leader, where I'm challenging you to rise up, speak up, and create a movement. I'm your host, Ruby Fremont, and I'm here as a catalyst for you, the new generation of thought leaders. Join me every week as I dive into raw and real conversations that will help you amplify your presence, influence, and impact. Hey, thought leaders, I am back with another guest that I connected with at the New Media Summit back in September in Austin. And this gentleman got my attention because he is an expert and a pioneer in the field of inner transformation. And I am obsessed with inner work. In fact, inner work is the reason that I feel I have gotten this far in my career. So Mark, welcome to today's Thought Leader. I'm super excited to dive into this conversation with you.
Thank you, Ruby. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to talk with you too.
Yeah. So Mark, you are super well versed in Eastern body-mind training methods and philosophy, and you integrate that into the work that you do, even in the yoga teaching that you do. And I know from just our previous conversations that you focus solely on this inner, what we call the inner transformation, to help people propel further in whatever it is that they're doing, either professionally or personally. So tell us a little bit more about the work that you do.
Got it. Sure. So what I do, there's a couple layers of the work that I do. One is physical. I work with the body, because what I found over the years is that nothing is just mental, nothing is just emotional, nothing is just physical, that all of our challenges, our blocks show up on multiple levels. I mean, I don't think I'm extraordinary in the sense that I've had a challenging childhood or, difficult things happen, but I did grow up with some challenges that I became very clear that affected me in my life and my functionality as an individual. So I got really interested in doing work to just quote unquote fix myself. And as I was doing that, I realized, wow, this stuff is lodged in my body. The way that we feel, our energy, as some people may call it. And so when I started to study Eastern practices, I found that a lot of them targeted the body, the mind, and what's considered or called the subtle body. And when I did practices combining those things, I got a lot more result. And when I started to work with people individually as well, I noticed that when we targeted the sort of intersection point between the body and the mind and the
Mhm.
emotions, that I was getting a lot more result and transformation with the people that I was working with.
Mm. Do you feel that most people today in the personal development space are focused more so on like mind versus creating that correlation between mind and body?
I think that's quite prevalent. I wouldn't say everybody's doing that,
Mhm.
but even in the therapy world, I actually get a lot of clients sent to me who've done therapy for 10, 20 years
Mhm.
and have gotten stuck. And I think usually where people have gotten stuck tends to be in the mind.
Mhm.
So they'll process something mentally, and then they might even do something like NLP or some form of positive thinking or a method of overcoming the thought process.
Mhm.
But when it doesn't actually get to the body and working how we've somaticize that experience,
Mhm.
whatever trauma we went through, challenging experience, and the way that we've internalized it is not just mental but very physical.
Right.
Yeah,
So what you're saying is traumas, wounds, anything that we experience in our lives, it doesn't just impact our mental state, it actually impacts our body and can get stuck in our
correct.
physical bodies. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what you'll see in the yoga world is that people are doing amazing body based work, right?
Mhm.
So you're doing all these yoga practices. A lot of people have this transformation happen because they're starting to reorganize the way that their body is structured and organized. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Yeah.
So, for example, if you see someone who's really charismatic person, they have a particular kind of way they hold their body and their body language, right?
Mhm.
And you can kind of feel their presence. And then there's certain people who might feel more shut down and their posture is more inward like this, right? So
Mhm.
in the sense, the psychology reflects on the body,
Mhm.
right? Pretty much universally.
Yeah.
So when you work the body and change the body with something like yoga, where you're holding these postures for a long time and you're
Mhm.
actually restructuring the fascial system and also the nervous system, that's a big piece.
Mhm.
You start to have transformations. And that's why people go through these huge changes from practicing yoga. I've had
Mm.
so many clients who just came to my yoga class, but through just doing the physical yoga, their whole life started to turn around, right?
Mm.
And I think you have shared something like that from your experience, right?
Yeah, so I love that you brought that up because in 2012, which was not the only rock bottom I've hit, but the most recent one, if you haven't heard my first episode on the podcast, go back and listen to it now because that's where I talk about my story. But during that time when I was really working to shift my life from a life of addiction and toxic cycles
Hmm.
to something different. Yoga played a massive role in that for me. I started doing hot yoga at that time. And for me, it was the only thing that would take my mind off of my mind. It was the
Right.
only thing that got me out of my mind and into my body and really focused on how my body felt, and it was really fucking hard. Like I had never done yoga before. Here I was attempting hot yoga and I was doing it about 3 days a week, and I think for the first about 2 or 3 months of me going consistently, I would just lay there and cry in savasana at the end of class. And it felt so good to be able to have a space where I could just drop into my body like that and experience that level of what I know now is healing. Back
Hmm.
then, I had no idea what was going on and why I was crying during Savasana. I just kind of rolled with it.
Yeah.
So I believe 1,000% that we like our traumas are lodged in our physical bodies, and when people only work on themselves mentally or emotionally, there is a huge component that is missing to really complete the transformation or to make the transformation last.
Right, for sure. And I think it works both ways. I've seen people who've done a lot of great physical work, but
Hmm.
they're not doing much mind training
Right.
or deeper emotional work. So you hit a glass ceiling, right?
Yeah.
And then the same thing on this angle of people who've done a lot of therapy and a lot of mental work, that
Hmm.
you'll hit a wall at a certain point where you're not processing or you're avoiding something in the body that's not being fully digested or cleared.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and this is what leads to, I mean, I believe this is what leads to a lot of us getting really sick. Or, for me, if I don't move my body every day, I'll notice the anxiety comes back, or the depression comes back, or like old things, patterns come back. As long as I'm keeping the energy flowing, in my
Hmm.
body, because I use my mind every day in the work that I do, and I'm very
Yeah.
much in this personal development space. But if I'm not moving my body as much as I'm moving my mind, I
Hmm.
notice that energy getting stagnant and again. And um, yeah, I think as leaders, it's imperative that we really own our responsibility to show up in our highest good. And that requires that we pay attention to not just the mental upgrades or the spiritual upgrades or just the physical, but all of it.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a holistic deal, especially
Yeah.
if you want to be performing at the highest level. And if you're these days, some of us were working with hundreds and thousands of people, and that's a lot of energy to be harnessing and working with. So you want to be in your top-notch shape, and I think it's really important to be doing maintenance on all levels.
Yeah. So, with the work that you do or that you've done with your clients, um, to create those shifts, those transformational shifts that last,
Right.
what is it that you feel people need to, like, how do we go about it? Because I feel like there's some people that find it easier to start in the mind, and then there's some
Hmm.
people who find it easier to start in the body. How do we get into this place of like working through all of this harmoniously?
I mean, I think it's okay to start from the place where it's easiest,
Mm,
but what I found is if you start to if when you know you're in a cycle, right? When you're stuck because the pattern will keep repeating.
mm-hmm,
That's what I experienced because I was obsessed with the energy and the body, and I spent a lot of time with that. And at a certain point, I really needed to do a little bit more of a focused emotional therapy type of work where I was processing the content with a lot more consciousness
mm-hmm,
versus doing it kind of unconsciously in a body based practice. So I do think that you can go as far as you can with any method, but there's a point where your life and your experience will show you that you're stuck in a cycle. And I think
mm,
that's where we have to be honest with ourselves when that
mm-hmm,
happens. And even though you might love the method or your lifestyle, whatever you've built up around your practice, you have to be willing to kind of abandon that and look elsewhere and invite help. And I think a huge learning process for me, because I've always been very self-reliant,
mm-hmm.
I try to do everything by myself, and
Yep.
that's why I gravitated towards yoga and meditation because I can do this on my own, and I
Mm-hmm.
can figure it all out and fix it by myself. And
Yeah.
where I hit the glass ceiling at a certain point was like, oh, I wasn't seeing my blind spots, and I needed. I think people need coaches, people need healers, people do need teachers. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not that we give our power away to them, but we need someone else, or even if it's a friend or a peer that we're open to, that we trust, that can give us that outside perspective on what's going on. And then depending on what's needed, you should implement maybe a body-based practice or someone who can sit with you and point out exactly how you're avoiding your problem or your issue, right?
Mm,
With the work that I do these days, what I've kind of channeled into or focused into doing is I sit with people one-on-one,
mm-hmm.
and then I'll have them tell me what's going on in their lives. And then what I'll do in our school, so I'm a part of a school called the Luminous Awareness Institute, and we're located in Northern California. And we do sort of a psychology slash energy medicine and body energetics training
Mm-hmm.
and healing school. And based on some of the methods that I learned there, and I also teach there, what I'll do is I sit with someone, I'll track them. So meaning in real time, I'm watching their facial features.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get esoteric, their energy, which is
Mm-hmm.
sort of like an overall combination of everything that I'm taking in, right?
Yep.
I like to call it it's a form of synesthesia, where you combine what you see with what you feel and what you know,
Mm.
and you make sense out of what you're perceiving. So based on
Uh-huh.
my training and some of the contexts and models that I have in my brain, I can watch someone's pattern, and I'm looking for different types of dissociative tendencies. Because what happens for most people when they have a traumatic experience, challenging experience, and often in early childhood, is that they'll develop these coping and defense mechanisms,
Right.
right? And they're not evil or bad, right? They
Mm-hmm.
helped us survive. For example, some people will check out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's with their phone, or they'll just kind of space out and kind of tune out, right? Or they'll go
Right.
numb,
Right.
or they'll get in their head and spin. They'll start to think about it, but they're not
Mm-hmm.
feeling, right? So what I'm doing is watching for those types of basic patterns, and I'll point them out and invite people to come back into their experience. Does that
Mm.
make sense? It,
Yeah.
yeah.
So like instead of like, let's say checking out, and people check out in a multitude of ways, like going on their phones,
Hmm.
binge watching TV,
Yeah.
basically distracting themselves.
Yeah.
So really helping them come back to the present moment and and recognizing what it is that they're doing. Is that right?
Yeah, partially. So checking out's normal. I do it too. We all need
Right.
to do
We
it
all, yeah.
sometimes. So,
I feel like it's needed sometimes, and like
oh,
people give us
completely.
like flat slack for it. It's like, no, sometimes you need to, because sometimes your brain legitimately just needs a break.
Yeah, completely. I don't know anyone who doesn't do it. I totally do it. I own it, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, but what I do is if there's a particular emotional experience
Hmm.
like for example, a lot of people have deep terror or
Hmm.
a deep sense of um, insecurity, right?
Hmm.
And so when you start to move towards that to an experience that triggers that, they'll go into a coping mechanism and they'll sort of like dislocate or disassociate in some way and avoid that spot. But as a result, that never gets processed, right?
Mm.
And that's an intelligent mechanism because when we were younger, we often didn't know how to process it.
Right.
And usually it's because our parents also didn't know either.
Hmm.
So it was never shown to us,
Hmm.
right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in an ideal circumstance, and this comes down to, again, some theories on attachment and bonding and developmental psychology, right? But human beings are creatures designed to learn through bonding and connection.
Hmm.
Okay. So we need to connect. And like certain animals, they pop out of the womb and they just function and they survive on their own, right?
Right.
Human beings can't. We're completely dependent on our parental figures and
Hmm.
and the adults around us. And through relating with them, we adapt and take on an imprint. And then through those ways, we learn how to relate to ourselves and their environment, right? We're
Mm.
completely adapted. That's why we have culture too, right?
Right.
Culture is an adaptive mechanism.
Right.
So it's a social adaptive mechanism. So
Hmm.
for a lot of people, we come from, at this point, generations of war and trauma and
Hmm.
all sorts of just really intense, time periods. So there's a lot of this generational trauma that we're experiencing. So our
Hmm.
parents are often dissociating from their experience. We're a baby, we need connection, we're crying, and the parents are not there, or maybe they're having a meltdown, right?
Hmm.
So then very often a child will try to regulate themselves, but they won't know how to because no one showed them. So
Right.
they'll just do what they can, like dissociate, right?
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, because yes, human beings operate this way. We need our parents when we're born, and the fact that we can create these patterns for ourselves at such a young age, and at one point in time those patterns really served us. I
Hmm.
have this one that I've currently been working through, and it's the pattern of um, keeping people at a distance so that I can keep myself safe, right?
Totally. It's a good one.
And at one, right, like I bet there's a
I have
lot
that
of
too.
listeners who have that one. You've
Yeah.
but it's crazy, and I never fully owned it until like 2018, when I realized all the different ways in which this was showing up in my life. Like there was a
Hmm.
multitude of ways that I didn't even recognize that this was showing up, nor
Yeah.
did I recognize the habits that I created that stem from this wound, this need to feel safe. So I'm just going to put
Yeah.
these walls up and protect myself. And at one point in time, like that really served me, right? There was a
Totally.
reason that I created that habit, that behavioral pattern.
Yeah.
And now it no longer serves me, nor do I really wish to hold on to it. So, I mean, I believe like recognizing what those things are is so crucial, because when you don't recognize what it is, you can't change a damn thing.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a couple of things.
Yeah.
One, I mean, first of all, I think it's cool that you know that it's about safety because a lot of people don't know that it's about safety.
Yeah.
Number two, most people think it's the environment, right? It's
Right.
the other people. They're not trustworthy. Worthy.
Right.
The world's not trustworthy. World's not
Hmm.
safe. But you've come to the point where you see that, oh, it's me doing that. I'm pushing away.
Hmm.
So those two things are, I think, huge,
Hmm.
right? And then the other question and curiosity I have is, how does that affect you in your life or in your career and your work and how you show up in your
Yeah.
career?
Yeah. And that's what brought it up. Like that's what brought it to the forefront. Meaning that's what helped me realize that I wanted to change the pattern,
Hmm.
because there was some sort of comfort within that I
Yeah.
had, and I was totally okay with it. I was totally okay with,
Right.
okay, keep people at a distance. I'm safe. But then when it came down to my business and feeling really isolated and feeling
Yeah.
quote unquote unsupported, uh, because I wasn't technically unsupported, I just was choosing to not see the support or keep the support at a distance, right?
Yeah.
And so here I was, like, recognizing these things, and how, like, but I want it to feel different. And I didn't get this far, Mark, in my career or my life by refusing to own my shit. Like, I'm here because I've owned my shit.
Hmm.
And so for me, yeah, the safety mechanism, like to keep myself safe and hold people at a distance, that no longer serves me in my business, because I'm in an era in my business of, like, really wanting to collaborate and really wanting to connect with people and really wanting to
Hmm.
build a community around the work that I'm doing. Um, and
Right.
so that requires me to show up differently for the people around me.
Yeah. No, completely. Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's when you have that experience of being afraid of people, what do you do? What have you been doing, or how have you been working with that? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I continue to find new ways, and to our listeners, like, I'm super open about sharing this, because I know that there are other people who are probably experiencing this exact same pattern, and it's really
Hmm.
important to understand, um, to recognize the mechanics behind it, because it helps you understand yourself at a deeper level. So for me, um, there's different reactions that I have. There's, like, I'm just not going to get to know you. Like,
Mm.
I'm just
Uh-huh.
not going to go there. Like, you
Right.
say we should meet up for coffee, cool. I'm just going to ignore that moving forward.
Right.
Or there's the hey, I'm here to support you, to be like, thank you. And then I don't follow up.
Right.
Or the not reaching out for support, or when
Hmm.
support comes my way, ignoring it or
Yeah.
flipping it around, turning the table. So, but how can I support you? So really
Right. Right.
just keeping people at a distance,
Hmm.
um, because again, it just keeps me safe.
Right. Do you know what helps you feel safe?
Um, having well, see, this is the conundrum. So having
Hmm.
people around me that I trust,
Yeah.
but also in that recognizing that I don't let people in enough for me
Right.
to trust them. Like, I
Yeah.
have my little trust circle. I
Totally.
have my
Totally.
little comfy, cozy circle, and I love them to death, and they're
Right.
amazing. But could that circle be bigger? For sure.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So often when this sort of thing comes up, I apply a variety of um, techniques, but the one I've been playing with a lot recently that's been fun is, so when that comes up, and if you notice it,
Mhm.
see if you can track the fear that's actually there,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm scared. Like
Right.
and that's where I think the body awareness is super crucial, because when we have that mindfulness of the body, and the Buddha actually taught this too, is like, have mindfulness of your body. And I
Mhm.
think where that applies for us in this context is, if we're aware of the body, we'll start to know when our sort of scared parts, right, are
Mhm.
coming up, and then you can start to investigate it. And I think this is where also self-reflection and meditation is really powerful, because if you can start to examine, oh, I get freaked out, what's going on with that part of me, and you
Mhm.
can actually find it in the body.
Mhm.
The beautiful thing is that the body is this intelligent, amazing organism, and you can actually, with your consciousness, dialogue with these parts of you. And
Mhm.
there's some really cool methods out now, like IFS, it's internal family systems, which is a therapy system, and
Mhm.
other things like family constellation
Mhm.
therapy and things like that, where you develop a way of dialoguing with these parts actively, and there's an intelligence in these parts that actually speak to you and tell you what's going on.
Mhm.
And then from there, you can actually start to interparent or be with those parts of you or us, right? Does that make
Mhm.
sense? And I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
Like the scared parts of us,
Hmm.
and I'm going to use this example because I think, again, it's just easy for people to resonate with.
Sure.
um, when we're scared, it can often feel like a wall, like it's thrown right in front of us. Like, if you're
Hmm.
walking in a direction and you get scared, this wall is thrown down.
Yeah.
And when you see the wall, you turn the other way. And turning the other way is going back into some sort of a pattern.
Right.
So instead, it's like face the wall, ask it questions. Why is it here? Why is it present? And for many people, it's even like recognizing that the fear is there, because when
Exactly.
you turn around, you're kind of running on autopilot when you're doing, you don't even notice that, oh,
Hmm.
I'm scared, so I'm going to turn around and do this other thing.
Yeah, and that's the difficult part with all defense mechanisms and triggers, right? Is that they speak to some of the most primal parts of our brain. Like we literally feel like we're gonna fucking die or
Yeah.
get killed or like rejected and then abandoned from the tribe and banished for
Yeah.
eternity. Like that's actually how it processes in our body
Right.
mind. It's that intense.
Yeah.
So it's often very difficult for people to realize that and step out of it. And I think
Mhm.
that's where different types of Eastern practices, meditation practices, like in Buddhism, this concept of emptiness or no self is really important, right? Like when you can actually examine those experiences and you practice examining your experience and you learn how to step back or step
Mhm.
out, right? I'm not sure
Mhm.
if you've heard some of these practices, like, going into the witness, right?
Mhm.
Becoming the observer, right?
Yeah.
So if you break that down, what you're doing in a sense is you're seeing that you're having a body response or sensation or a thought or a feeling, and you're stepping back from them in a sense, shifting your identification or your identification point, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. Like, for
Mhm.
example, if you say I am my body, right? I'm
Right.
5 foot whatever, I'm 6 foot. When you say that in your mind, you're saying that I am the body.
Right.
Okay. I have blue eyes. So now you're going from being the body to being an owner of the eye. Does
Right.
that make sense? We're already doing this sort of identity shift all the time. So when you train, what you can do is step back out of your experience and observe it and see it not as you, in a sense. And
Yeah.
from that place, you can begin to examine, relate, inner parent, or
Mhm.
step out, right? Does that make sense? Or let go. But
Yeah.
when we're in fixation, when we're triggered, usually what's going on is that we're completely identified with that part of us,
Mhm.
right? And there's no negotiation there.
Yeah, it's very what comes to mind first with that, and I know that this is pretty rampant, especially in the entrepreneurial space because it's such a demanding space, is
Yeah.
anxiety. When you start to experience anxiety, that is all that you feel like you're
Right.
experiencing. And for me, the practice of stepping outside my body is something that I do regularly. And when anxiety hits, it might take a few moments. First of all, let me be
Hmm.
honest, it might take a few moments for me to like step out, but I really make a conscious effort to step outside of the anxiety, because when you're in anxiety, it sounds like I am anxious, I am anxious, I am
Yeah.
anxious.
Hmm.
And you're identifying with anxiety, like that you are anxiety. But it's not that you are anxiety, you are experiencing
Right.
anxiety.
Yeah.
And if you can step outside and actually recognize that, and then ask yourself, why is the anxiety present? Where am I feeling it in my body? What am I thinking when it arises?
Hmm.
That in itself helps me bring the anxiety levels down
Nice.
enough for me to work through the actual problem or issue or trigger at hand.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. And in a moment ago, you said, I'm experiencing anxiety. And I
Right.
think that's a great trick too. If you're more mentally inclined, then just rephrasing how you're relating to that experience by saying, oh, I'm anxiety versus, oh, I am experiencing anxiety.
Hmm.
There's even a little bit of a step back, right? So I think that's a great
Yeah.
trick. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same with people who say I am depressed.
Right.
You're experiencing depression. Like
Yeah.
really separate yourself from it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So are you crystallizing that experience that you really don't want to be having
Hmm.
through your thought, speech, and action? Or are you stepping back from the experience and kind of unhooking from it a little bit or unblending from it? Right.
Hmm.
And the second stage is like how to shift it, right? Because
Hmm.
I think for a lot of us who've been doing some self-development work for a while, we're aware of our shit, right?
Right.
You can see it. And I experienced that for a long time too, but I couldn't figure out how to step out of the experience enough or how to actually release it from my body.
Hmm.
um, and that's to me one of the most interesting spots of like, can we find some actual methods that are effective in that?
Hmm.
And if I were to make a blanket statement, it really comes down to um, love,
Mm,
right? Like caring for these parts, because
mm,
ultimately a lot of our anxiety, fear, depression comes, what I found in my clinic over and over and over, and this is something I've seen so many times, I just have no doubt about it at this point, is that it all comes down to connection
mhm,
and relationships, right? It's fundamental, rooted in the fundamental fear of some sort of disconnection or experience of isolation or disconnection.
right.
So in our school, we talk about rupture, right? We have some experience that makes us feel betrayed or disconnected or abandoned or disregarded, things like that. And then we develop a coping mechanism around it. So very often the repair itself is a loving response of some sort. And when
Mm,
I say love, there's a lot of components to it, right? Like some of
mhm,
us who are abandoned, just the process of when we unhook, instead of trying to get rid of the experience,
mhm,
if we can just be there for ourselves
mhm,
and not dissociate and stay present, ideally lovingly, that has an amazingly therapeutic effect on your own nervous system, right?
mhm,
I'm not sure if you've ever experienced this, but with a therapist or a friend or healer, when someone just holds your hand and they're
mhm,
just there and you can feel them and they don't say anything, you know,
mhm,
and they're just being there with you and something starts to calm down. Have you ever experienced that before?
mhm. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of my teachers, Peter Cummings, who's in San Diego, and he's an amazing attachment therapist, and he talks about restful connection,
Mhm,
right? When two people are in a state of ease, or at least one person is, and they're connected, and that process of connecting and staying at ease creates regulation.
mm,
That makes sense?
yeah.
Yeah. So the difficult thing about I think Americans in general, we tend to be really isolated, especially in metropolitan areas and entrepreneurs, because we're just always working, right?
Mhm.
And trying to do the next cool thing and be on the
Right.
cutting edge and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so we don't spend enough time with people, or we're in kind of competition with the people that we're working with sometimes, even, or, there's some stuff there that makes it difficult to connect. And that isolation then compounds, right? Because we
Mhm,
tend to also come from that background where we felt disconnected. And then, like you had said, we can't reach out. We're not reaching out. We don't have
mhm,
community and we're spinning in our aloneness. And that's
mm,
the perfect recipe for anxiety and being stuck in it.
yeah.
And I think the resource there is to actually connect. And through that loving, compassionate connection, we can actually regulate it with each other. And once
Mhm,
you get that with other people a lot, you actually get really good at doing that with yourself. That's the thing.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you say that about entrepreneurs because I think that um, it, it it's our it's our ingrained behavioral patterns that keep us from connecting for whatever reason, like it's keeping me safe, or like we view people as competition. Why? Well, there's something within you that's there that is triggering that to come to the surface, and so you just keep people at a distance. But on the
Hmm.
flip side, you're complaining about feeling like you're in isolation.
Right.
It's like people are doing this to themselves, and like you said, the remedy is like then going out and connecting.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I haven't been to too many entrepreneur events, but the couple that I've gone to was where I met you, with
Mhm,
Steve Olsher, and also with Brendan Burchard.
mhm,
And what I was impressed with both of them is, first of all, their integrity and their care, but their focus on community and connection.
mhm.
Because I think we really need that, and they
Yeah.
really emphasize that, and I thought that was beautiful, and I think that's really therapeutic. And a lot of times with entrepreneurs that I've worked with, that I've known, they tend to be really driven people.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times what's driving them is their wounding, in a sense,
Mhm.
right? And it's a beautiful thing because they do amazing things in the world. And like this one person I know, he really cares. He's really trying to do something phenomenal in the world, and he's very effective at it, and
Mhm.
he's suffering so much,
Mm.
and it's really painful to watch. And through the work we've done together, he's starting to be able to see that and step out of it. So it's the drive doesn't go away. It's who you are. It's at the core of who you are.
Mhm.
But the way that you continue to generate and experience pain can shift over time if you can sort of step out of the unhealthy aspect of that habit.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that you said driven by their wounding because it made me think of, well, is there then two ways that we approach this, especially the purpose driven people? Because like purpose driven entrepreneurs and leaders, we our purpose 99.9% of the time stems from our story, right? It's
Right.
related to our story. It's related to our wounds. And I definitely agree that for many people when they get started, they're definitely driven by their wounding because that's what we know. Like
Right.
that's what we know.
Right.
And then somewhere along the line, you start to also experience deeper levels of your own transformation. And so does it eventually flip around and become something that maybe you're driven instead of by your wounding, but by providing a solution or by the transformation that you can facilitate? Like, what do you think that looks like? And is there an opposing way of finding your drive?
Yeah, I think it's okay to be motivated by that. That's natural. There's nothing wrong with that. But I
Mm-hmm.
think in the process of being motivated by that, if you're really doing the work, you'll discover what the solution is. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that is for each unique person a little different,
Mm-hmm.
depending on their upbringing, what their challenges are, right? And when you find that solution, I think that's the nugget. Like that's what you're going to offer people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I feel like that's what I'm experiencing right now with my work is, I was trying to heal all the ways that I was fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that, I just, they're for myself. So the
Right.
tools that I picked up that actually work was like, oh, this shit works. And let me see if I can help other people with it. And then
Yeah.
if it works, it works,
Yeah.
and then when it works, you get confident, right?
Yep.
Because you're getting results. So I think for entrepreneurs, if you do that inner work and you keep refining it and doing it, something might work for a little bit, but you'll hit that wall because it's not quite there. And you
Yeah.
keep working that, and eventually you'll hit the real thing that helps you heal. And that thing you'll know in and out because you went through it, and you also know that works because it's worked on you. And then
Mm-hmm.
from there you help enough people, then you have this organic confidence right behind that particular offering. There's
Mm-hmm.
no doubt about it. And my whole life, that's what I've been looking for, right? I'm 40 years old right now. I started this when I was 18,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm finally putting myself out there because it took me that long. For me, it doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
take everyone that long, but to
Right.
find something where I'm like, this shit works, I know, so I'm ready to share it with people, right?
Right.
And now I don't have any doubt about talking about it or giving people, sessions or
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
So would you say now you're driven by the solution versus the wounding?
completely,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. and,
Okay.
and I think that your life circumstances change, right? Because when you're constantly acting from, say, fear or insecurity or terror, and that's the motivating factor,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're doing great work, it'll feel shitty.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you'll be left with a shitty taste at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start to really heal that deep wound and you start to feel that welling up of well-being and goodness, and that's really where you're coming from, it's not that the drive doesn't go away. I actually have more drive now than I
Mm-hmm.
did 20 years ago because for me, my particular wounding debilitated me,
Mm-hmm.
made me feel super insignificant and insecure and afraid, and I couldn't put myself out there.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did my healing work, now I feel really clear and I feel supported. I feel connected in my life, my world. Not 100%. I still go through
Right.
cycles, but it allows me to put myself out there with way more confidence. And I feel like I'm acting out of the place of, oh, I want to share this
Mm-hmm.
versus, oh, I'm afraid that I'm going to fall apart or the world's going to fall apart if I don't do this, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
different kind of motivation.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that there's also a piece in there when um, people first experience that desire to share with others. For a lot of people, it's almost like their first time they feel as though they're being heard or listened to or seen.
Mm, hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so how it translates is, okay, so now you're putting your wounds out there for everyone to see and recognize and almost validate that this is what happened. And I don't think this is necessarily a wrong thing. I think for some people this is just part of their transformational journey. And
Completely.
social media has made it really easy for us to feel heard and seen because we just have to press enter and our shit's out there. um, but there is an energy that is transmuted when someone is sharing from that place, from the wounded place, versus from, and I don't want to say healed because I think we're always healing, but from a more transformed place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I think you're nailing that. I mean, you can feel it. And I think that especially people who, like, if you're going to be a thought leader, if your focus is impact and influence of the highest order,
Hmm.
then that's really going to matter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because people feel your energy. I mean, I thought I was being woo woo talking about energy at New Media Summit, but I heard that word thrown around a lot,
Yep.
constantly. And when I was listening to the icons, the people on the stage that were sort of judging or giving feedback to the participants and the
Hmm.
pitch people who were giving the pitch for the podcast, I heard repetitively, I wasn't feeling your energy. I wasn't feeling the
Hmm.
authenticity or the integrity or the congruence there. And I remember
Hmm.
one lady, she was like, she was saying to someone, hey, I noticed that there's something unprocessed about what you're presenting that's personal.
Right.
And I want to invite you to work on that. And I was like, whoa, because I felt that too from that particular
Yeah.
person. And I thought that was a really significant um, observation, you know? And I think people feel your energy. People feel how much work you've done, the clarity that you have in your system, whether you're coming from a place of insecurity or whether you're coming from a place of authentic care. And
Hmm.
right. So,
Yeah. And this is why I emphasize time and time again that the inner work is mandatory. It's crucial if you're here to be a thought leader. If you're here to lead in any way, shape, or form, you must first begin by leading your own life, and that means that you must first commit to your own inner work and inner transformation. And um, I don't believe that there is a end result. I believe that
mm,
we are the result in any given moment. Like, just my being today is the result of 37 years of being in this work, and then my being tomorrow is going to be the result of that many, like, it's just this evolution
yeah.
that we've got to commit to, because in order to lead from the highest good, we have to take that as a divine responsibility, and that divine
Hmm.
responsibility starts with us showing up in a capacity where we can lead, and
For
and
sure.
if you're still carrying around your wounds like badges of honor and failing to recognize that they exist, and you've got like your shit goggles on where you can't even see your own shit, like you're projecting, then you're not really
Hmm.
facilitating anything, and you're not being or embodying what it is that you're teaching and preaching and speaking about.
Completely. Yeah. What I find is that I mean, I think one of the words that you uh had on your post today I saw was presence. There's
Hmm.
presence, influence, impact,
Yeah.
right? And that presence piece, and again, I think this is what we're talking about, right, is like sort of the quality or the energy that you emanate into the world. And our internal process shows up in the way that we hold our body, the way that we talk, the way that we think, and like you said, your shit goggles, so like the way that you see the world too.
Yeah.
And the way that you see the world inevitably influences why and how you act in the world in every
Yeah.
moment. So what I found is that when you shift that stuff on a deep internal level, and I think you've probably discovered this too, and I'm really actually curious what your experience was with this in terms of your career and how things shifted for you, because you have a really magnified energy, right? You're very powerful. I noticed you at the event. You're very outspoken, and you there's, like you said, you don't give a fuck. You're just like,
Mm-hmm.
this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm thinking, and here you go. And there's that clarity there, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
really clean. Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, there's some people who say fuck and they're doing this and that, and it's kind of like, ooh, that's kind of intense. But
Yeah.
with you, there's just this clarity that comes through when you speak.
Mm.
So
Thank
what was
you.
that? What was the process for you in terms of coming into that?
Yeah, 37 years. Of me getting to know myself. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It wasn't like a overnight realization. It was like my last rock bottom, 2012, the first time ever I took ownership. The first time ever in my life that I took ownership for where I was, understanding that I was an addict because of my
Mm-hmm.
choices,
Mm-hmm.
not because of my circumstances, not because people forced me to be. I was in a cycle of toxic and abusive relationships because of my choices. And it was that power that I took into the years that came after. And it was me like really creating my life all over again through an accumulation of my choices, and really diving deep into my own inner work and inner transformation, and asking,
Yeah.
the question why a lot. Like, why am I feeling this? Versus like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm depressed. Why am I experiencing depression right now? Why am
Yeah.
I experiencing anxiety? Why am I making this choice right now? um, and really diving into that. And in my career, I started this work working as a coach in 2014. And I mean, even looking back at my branding, for example, from
Mhm.
2014, so different, very, very vanilla, confetti, sprinkle cupcake, different, maybe not even sprinkles, like it was just
Mhm.
vanilla cupcake.
Mm.
And it was because I hadn't really come into my own, meaning I hadn't really, for years, I was recognizing my wounds.
Right.
And that's when I started to recognize my gifts.
Mm.
And it's in the recognition of our gifts that I feel we start to gain that confidence. But I could only start to recognize my gifts because I was working through those wounds
Nice.
enough to create a clear path.
Yeah. Yeah. So it cleared the way for you. And
Yes.
what I felt from you as you were talking about that, the words that came to my mind were ownership
Yeah.
and intense care,
Mm-hmm.
like the passion. You're just like, you
Mm-hmm.
care about this. You're gonna do something about this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then hard work, right?
Yeah.
You've kind of stuck to the path and you're constantly refining and improving and shifting and looking at yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like those things galvanized who you are today, in a
Mm-hmm.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And it'll continue
Mm-hmm.
to shift as I continue to go through, my own
Yeah.
transformation. And that's why this work is so important.
Do you notice the difference, like when you're around people, like because you hang out around a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders in the field and things like that? Like, what do you notice about the people that stand out to you?
The people that stand out to me are the ones who come, always the ones who come from a place of integrity. I think if
Mm-hmm.
there's anything that always stands out to me immediately, it's integrity.
Mm.
I can sense bullshit a mile away, and I would rather just not be around that energy. What I'd rather be around someone who's like in their shit
Mm.
and owning it.
Yeah.
And maybe they look messy as fuck, but I'd rather be around their energy because at least they're owning it, and at least they're
Mm.
showing up as they are, versus putting up a facade and pretending to be something different. So for me, I always gravitate towards those people who I feel are being in alignment with integrity and showing up um, like in a real way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What attracts you to them, those types of people? Like,
I
what is
mean,
it?
for me, it's my number one value is integrity. And
Mm.
I think that this shows in everything that I do, from my programs to the way I work with my clients to my events.
Mm-hmm.
Integrity is always number one.
Mm.
And that's why I am so attracted to it. And also, side note, and I've done a ton of rants on this, I feel like integrity is lacking in the online space. And I feel like
Sure.
integrity is lacking in a lot of different um, entrepreneurial endeavors, because
Mm-hmm.
people like to take shortcuts. And so
Completely.
for me, integrity is just a really strong attraction point.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I was realizing that's really important for me too.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I feel safer when I see integrity. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about you, but for me, I've been around a lot of different spiritual teachers and different environments and different communities and watched, gurus come and go and all
Right.
that. And always the painful thing for me was when there was a breach of trust or breach of integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just destroys your clients, your followers, your constituents, because it's like it's a relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even in the entrepreneurial space, even if you're selling something that's just marketing or business oriented, I think there's still a relationship happening,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about connection. And when there's integrity, there's trust.
Mm-hmm.
You can relax. I can feel at ease. I can really open up to what they're teaching me.
Yeah.
So I find as a teacher, as an influencer, as a thought leader, integrity is so powerful. And the
Mm-hmm.
people that I feel drawn to are people who have, and I can see that congruence and that integrity and that care. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
so much safer, right? And I want to buy their product. I want to follow them. I'm interested in them. They're attractive,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, I agree. Integrity equals leads to a sense of safety.
Yeah.
for the audience, for the people around you.
hmm
Yeah.
And I think this is where it's cool as an entrepreneur, whatever you're doing, to understand psychology and to accept who we are as human beings, as connection
Mm-hmm.
beings, as beings of connection and tribalism and attachment. Because yeah, then you can actually get what's behind the mechanism of connecting.
Right.
Because when you're selling something someone, you're trying to offer value
Mm-hmm.
that actually meets a need, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
a relationship that you're forming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at it from that lens, I wonder how the sort of dynamic would change for a lot of people in their business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you right now, it shifts everything.
Mhm.
This is like a lot of the
Yeah.
work that I do with my clients. It's like
Nice.
people are so fixated on instant gratification that they forget that loyalty and relationship building is important, and that starts with
hmm
how you're showing up. So
Yeah.
Mark, we are like over time and nearing the end of this podcast episode. I could talk to you forever. I feel like we're going to have to do a future episode with you back on the show. But why don't you share some final thoughts with our audience today?
So yeah, I have a couple phrases that I came up with that I was thinking about. First one is, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility.
Mm,
Um, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. Meaning your life, most of us grew up in circumstances, went through things that we didn't have control over. Where you're at right now, it's not your fault. And it doesn't help to beat yourself up or blame yourself and say, oh, I created this, because I think
mhm.
the reality is you fucking didn't.
Right.
but but it's your responsibility, like, to change or shift that or to step into something else.
Hmm.
So that there's that invitation without shame.
Hmm.
um and then the other one is, your energy creates your perceptions,
Mm,
and your perception creates your world.
mm,
So your inner state, your thoughts, your feelings, all your unprocessed developmental wounding and the protection around that creates and constitutes your energy, and
hmm.
that affects your perception. And
Yeah.
then your perception will affect what you see out there in the world, as well
Hmm.
as how you see people relating to you
Right.
and how you relate to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's powerful. Super powerful. Um, Mark, thank you so much for being
Yeah, you're
here and
welcome.
for
Thanks for
sharing your
having me.
wisdom. Yeah.
Totally. It's been fun. Let's talk
Lots
more.
of fun. Yeah. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can connect with you online?
So I'm kind of new to this online entrepreneurial thing. It's kind of embarrassing, but you can find me on my website, marktanakayoga.com. I do so much more than yoga, but that's the website name right now, marktanakayoga.com. You can find some content on there. I have some podcast episodes from a long time ago. I have some new content I'm putting up as an online course that focuses on doing some of this internal work and emotional work, and
Mm,
in the context of meditation.
yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome. So, for those listeners who are really seeking to dive deeper into this inner work, I'll be sure to share those links with you. Mark, thank you again. I really, really appreciate you and honor you for the way in which you show up.
No, thanks. You too. Yeah, for sure.
Um, and to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on today's Thought Leader, where I'm challenging you to rise up, speak up, and create a movement. If you're looking to bring your message to the masses, please download my free online training, rubyfremon.com/CPR. If you have any questions for me or Mark about today's episode, please reach out to us online and drop a rating and review on iTunes. I will see you here next
Do
week
it.
for a see you here next week for a brand new episode of today's Thought Leader.